Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Shane. I run the events over at 10 Capital Network, and we have another great session for you today, Understanding the WorkTech and HR Tech Market. We're really excited to have George LaRocque and the PivotCX team join us today and tell you more about what they're doing. Throughout the session, if you have any questions, or if you're watching this as a recording, if you have any questions, please send those via email, or if live, go ahead and put those in the chat box for us today. We'll have a poll at the end of the session for you to answer as well. So if you could just indicate your interest, that would be great. With that, I'll bring up Hall Martin, our CEO, and George from the PivotCX team as well.
Great, Shane. Thanks for the introduction there. And thank you guys for joining us today. Today, we have a great presentation by George LaRocque about what's going on in the WorkTech marketplace. There's so much happening in the space now with remote work, return to office, hybrid models, and so forth. I think it'll be a great presentation today to learn what is going on. After that, we'll be having a presentation from PivotCX on their solution that was working in this space. So with that, let's bring up George. George, can you tell us more about yourself and your firm?
Yeah, thanks, Hall. Thanks, Shane. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm always excited to get in front of a group of investors who are curious about this space where we spend our time. So should I launch the slides or?
Go ahead and kick off and let's dig into the presentation.
As I mentioned, I'm George LaRocque, the founder at WorkTech. WorkTech is a market analyst and advisory firm. We're known as the source of truth for research and consulting advisory in the business of work. So we work with tech providers like PivotCX. We work with investors, business leaders, all focused on finding the next intersection of technology and work. I've been in the industry for more than 30 years. I ran recruitment and HR for tech companies for over a decade. I was an executive for a few market-leading HR tech firms for over a dozen years, scaling from early stage through funding, profitability, or both. WorkTech has been evolving into what it is today for over a dozen years. We run an accelerator called Impact WorkTech. You can learn all about it at oneworktech.com. I'm also the chair of a new investor forum that takes place at the largest HR technology conference in Vegas next month. Pretty classical format. It's free for all the investors. I'm really focusing on content and strategy there, but it's something for you to be aware of if you're curious about seeing the space and meeting vendors in the space. So today we're going to talk about the category, the size of the market, how the first half of the year went. I do have some color on how things are proceeding right now in mid Q3. We'll talk about I'll give you some context on the market, sort of current versus previous performance, what makes it unique, give you some of my observations, and save time for questions as well. So let's dig right in on the category. So for investors today that aren't well versed in WorkTech or HR tech, or maybe you don't know that you're not well versed in WorkTech or HR tech, I want to put aside a common myth that I hear from investors. I have these conversations all of the time with investors, from angels, family offices, to, institutional investors, VCs, private equity. And it sounds something like, the issues that fueled HR tech growth and adoption were, part of a moment in time during 2021, and now the pendulum is swinging back. We're getting back to normal things like remote work, hybrid work, skills-based organizations, people analytics. All of that was all a response to the pandemic, and that's over. And what's really important to understand is that this is a very mature market, and most of the trends that we saw and many of you became aware of through the pandemic, labor shortages, skills shortages, hybrid work, distributed work, these market forces, market drivers, and trends were in place long before the pandemic hit, or any of the issues that we're seeing today in the economy or labor market. And they're impacting enterprises of every size. And what I've got up on the slide here, what this sort of perfect storm met a lot of the data that I'm representing here is actually just before COVID hit. So I do a lot of research in a global study, and we've gone back on this research during and post pandemic. And talent issues are one of the 1 to 3 of the top 3 issues on the CEO's list. And this is basically around attraction, retention, and productivity. 1, 2, or 3 of those issues are usually on the top of the list. The percentage goes up from 47 when we broaden it across the C-suite. We've had productivity declining, depending on whose numbers you use, since 2005. We've had record low unemployment. Even today, the most recent number, 9.6 million open jobs in the U.S. We have an indisputably shrinking workforce. So the ratio of working age to retired individuals has dropped by 25% in the US and in most modern countries. There are just fewer people to do the work, yet we are still adding jobs and looking for more critical, more complicated skills. The issue of remote work and hybrid work in 2019, from this global study, we came out and one of the big headlines was distributed work is the future. 54% of companies were offering some sort of alternative model to being in the office every day. So I think the conversation there should really be focused on where the work needs to be done, what your culture is, and your management. And certainly we're starting to shift, but the pendulum, the sort of extremes, like everybody's hybrid or everybody's in the office, just doesn't fly in the face of a shrinking workforce and skills that have a shelf life of 2.5 to 5 years, depending on the complexity. This whole business of employees wanting meaning in their work, it's not a generational issue. All of our research shows that every generation in the workforce is looking for meaning in their work, and this goes back. We've done this research many times since 2012. So all of these trends, all of these things that we're talking about that seem like flash trends, have really been in place for decades. And what happened during COVID was it got compounded, and it brought it. Really, a lot of enterprises were caught flat-footed, and through the pandemic. And it forced us to start to address some of this. And there's been a HR technology, WorkTech market that has been emerging over the years. And in specific, I talk about the emergence of WorkTech. So WorkTech, it really unbridles creativity by meeting the employee where they are in the flow of work. WorkTech features and data are found where the work is getting done and where workforce decisions are being made. So it's designed sort of without ego for users across the enterprise, regardless of the interface, which is a huge cultural shift for incumbent players in the market. It's also a big technical shift because the foundational technology that's needed in order to be in the flow of work, to have data flowing, from the HR and what are typical HR systems, recruitment systems, into the enterprise and back, aren't strong suits for the incumbent platforms in the space. WorkTech is experience-driven, employee-driven, and designed for everybody who experiences it, whether it's a candidate, an employee, or a back office HR person, or hiring manager, et cetera. Things like diversity are embedded as a core tenet, front of mind for WorkTech customers, WorkTech providers and their customers. And the participation in the ecosystem is something that we see a real difference in these players who come to market. So I know I'm moving quickly here, and I'll get into some market data, but the way we see the market, we've got systems of work and systems of collaboration. So systems of work are literally where the work's getting done. It could be your point of sale system. It could be your manufacturing system. It could be something like Salesforce or Zendesk or whatever. Systems of collaboration, the most popular we hear a lot about are Teams, Slack, Asana, Google, Monday, systems that are helping employees and leaders connect and collaborate and get work done while they're in their systems of work. So this is it's relevant for both frontline workers and knowledge workers. Where we start to blend into work tech is where we see employee experience, core work tech, which is where payroll and human capital systems, HR information systems live, talent work tech, which is where learning lives, and then hiring work tech or recruitment, which is where PivotCX lives, who we'll see today, as well as other systems that are moving in this direction. And many of the incumbent players like an SAP or an Oracle are innovating in this direction. So while I am seeing new leaders emerge in this market, it's not to say that obviously some incumbents aren't innovating or may not take the lead in this space. And so what it looks like from a practitioner's perspective when they think about their work tech stack, we've seen enterprises with, on average, 30 different systems across the employee experience. And, there will still be a platform play surrounded by point solutions, if you will. But because of the fluidity of the data, it really consolidates where the users are spending their time, where they should be. So in the case of recruitment, engaging and communicating with candidates, engaging with hiring managers. In the case of HR, more strategic issues. And there will be systems integrated with these platforms, but it's a more simplistic experience for the users, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears and talk about the market itself and what its dynamics are. So work tech, the overall category, is a global market. And we're seeing it grow to 2026 to just under $1 trillion. Now, you've got to remember, this includes payroll, HCM, HRIS, workforce management, scheduling, recruitment, talent management, learning, et cetera. While the market, there's been a lot of market consolidation, I really view it as vendor consolidation because the market is growing faster than the market's consolidating. We're seeing increased adoption in the SMB and middle market. We're seeing increased adoption in emerging markets. So in places we had never seen work technology get adopted before, in Africa, Latin America, et cetera. And it's actually really buoyant there. We're also seeing new tech categories emerging. So just like the rest of the market, we're captured by the generative AI conversation, but AI is not new for work tech or HR tech. It's just what everybody's focused on and figuring out at the moment. And we do have some players that are taking the lead there as well. This market today, the category today, is hiring work tech, where recruitment happens. It's driven by all of the same catalysts, and we see it at about 25% of the overall market, and growing to about $244 billion, through 2026. Now, the company that we're going to look at today, I'm very familiar with, given its cross-channel communications. While they're focused in this hiring work tech category today, also, communication and collaboration is a category that we track that goes across all of the core work tech categories. So it's an interesting play in my mind because of the fact that it fits across all of the categories here, potentially depending on where they go. Okay, shifting gears again to first half 2023. We'll talk a little bit about historical numbers and how the market's performing today from a VC perspective, and then we'll get into some market observations. And I'm keeping an eye on time. I think I'm right on track to save some time for questions here. So this is a really busy slide, and I'm happy to share it. It shows we've been tracking the numbers since 2017, all of the growth capital coming into the space, thousands of transactions. And I'll narrow this down as the conversation goes. The value isn't really having the data. We all have access to tools that roll up all of the VC and announcements. The value isn't having it, is understanding where it fits within the work tech category and subcategories. We track across 60 different subcategories. And when I look at the reports from this, I'm a big user of Crunchbase and CB Insights and read everything that comes out from PitchBook and everything else. their numbers are generally about 50% of our numbers, and it's just a matter of focus and tracking. But that's really where the value in our numbers is understanding what is WorkTech, what is HR tech, what is recruitment. So H1 results, we saw $3.3 billion in the first half of this year across 136 deals. We've seen, we're at the midpoint of Q3, not reflected here. I tend to wait until the quarter before I look back and add to the numbers. Just it's, watching it every day or every week is a fool's errand in my personal opinion. But I know we've done another billion, and this is a strong year for the WorkTech market. We're on track to be potentially the third biggest year after 2021 and 2022, which were anomalies. And let's take a look at, well, actually, here we've got the categories again: HCM, talent acquisition, talent management, and Pivot would fit within the talent acquisition category with the ability to potentially branch out across the other categories. So much of HR and work is about communication and collaboration and experience. So let's look at, let's look at those numbers. So the interesting thing about, we're looking at 2020 to date now, broken down on a quarterly basis. You can see how 2021 and 2022 were anomalies. Our biggest year, 2021 was approaching 20 billion in VC that came, or growth capital that came into the space. We saw like 13 billion in 2022, and you can see there was a drop. So just like every other category in the space, we saw a real change as we moved into 2022. But as I'm looking at the market overall, I'm seeing something that I think it's important to put some context behind these numbers, some perspective. So when I'm looking at numbers, I tend to remove the anomaly, the anomalies, right? So on the top here, we're looking at 2017 to date by year. On the lower, we're looking at 2021 and 2022. And on the right, we're looking at the 4 quarters through H1 2023. Here we start to see perspective where our performance was a little more consistent than what we saw in the broad VC market. Let me give you some comparisons, what I mean by that. So I've got 2 comparisons. First, we've got PitchBook's data that was put out via TechCrunch, actually. And they looked at the broad VC market, showing the drop from Q4 to Q1. Everybody's hair was on fire in our category as well about this chart that was put out. But you'll notice that from Q4 to Q1, we were still chugging along at a rate that was greater than Q4 of the previous year, and sort of consistent with the end of 2021. So this was really interesting to me to watch this sort of transpire as we moved through the quarters. Then Scott Galloway came out with CB Insights data on H1 2022, and this famous 50% drop was again catching everybody's attention. And when I went and looked at our data, I saw we didn't have the drop. We were sort of chugging along. Now I don't have rose-colored glasses on. It's slower now than it has been in a few years, but it's on par with our 2019, 2018 years that were about 5 billion each. And prior to that, our biggest years were 1 or 2 billion. So it's a little bit of perspective and a little bit of, sort of stepping back and understanding that, back to my initial slides, these trends, these changes that are happening in the market are driving a lot of adoption and a lot of innovation in the space. So I'm still really bullish on the category and really excited about where it's headed. And let's talk a little bit about why in these market observations. So what's happening is, whether, we're all watching the economy, we're all seeing very inconsistent data points, the job market not reacting in the way that we expect it to based on inflation, et cetera. And so when I take a call with an employer or a tech provider, I know their hair is going to be on fire, but I'm not sure why until they tell me. If they're either growing and they can't keep up with it, they're hiring, frontline workers, they're in healthcare, they're going through the roof, they're in staffing and in particular verticals that are still thriving, or they're slowing. But everybody needs to do more with less, and it's driving new tech adoption. So everybody's looking at how do we shift to new technologies that either help us keep up with the growth or help us, maintain a good experience for employees and candidates while spending less or having fewer human resources. Budgets are still increasing across my numbers, across all the other analysts that I talk to, on average of 40%. I think we might see that dip a little, but they will still be increasing. Again, I mentioned earlier, seeing increased adoption in the SMB and middle market. We're seeing WorkTech extend across the enterprise. And as I mentioned, I think we'll see a lot of the incumbent platforms replaced, and a lot of the growth that's happening in the space right now, a lot of the pipeline growth with the vendors that I talk to is in this sort of platform replacement end of things. What are they doing? They're looking at automation. It's all, again, all about doing more with less. There's a real big focus on people data, the extended workforce. So bringing, whenever the economy, shifts, we tend to look at alternative ways to get the job done. And when extended workforce would include freelancers, contingent workforce, contractors, et cetera. And it all sort of, results, from my perspective, WorkTech adoption continues to grow. It will continue to grow. We're seeing investment. I've been on the phone with investors raising funds. It's slower. Folks are more hesitant, but we're still seeing deals get done. And the M&A activity is making room for more innovators. And I think new market leaders are going to emerge, but those may be, again, some of those platform players that we already know. I talked really fast. I threw a lot at you, but that's what I have for you today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Great. Thanks, George. And for those in the audience, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box and we'll get to them. I had several myself. The first one was, in the very first slide, you talked about productivity going down since 2005. Is that because there's fewer people working or we're not as productive? But what do you attribute that to?
I'm not an economist, but when we look at the numbers, I think it tends to be, labor productivity. And I think there's a GDP part of that conversation as well, but I think it's a combination of this sort of shift to service economy over the years, the shift in skills, the available labor force. I think there are a lot of factors contributing to that. I talk to economists frequently.
Great. Several years ago, I started seeing companies increasingly share data, even across company lines. They were aligning their systems to automatically share data from one system to the next. And it seems like data is a core element of WorkTech, where we have to share the data so different people can do different things on it. Would we say this is a data-centric problem, or is that just a secondary thing?
I would say that there is as I mentioned, there's a real resurgence of people data and people analytics, talent analytics. So I wouldn't go as far as saying it's a secondary thing, but I think in the first wave of people analytics, they were trying to be more predictive, and which is difficult to predict human behavior based on data points coming across the enterprise. But now the focus is really more driven by business performance. It's transactions that lead us to more traditional sort of KPIs and business drivers. So it's less about predicting human behavior and more about creating a picture of, how the enterprise is doing from a not just a revenue perspective, but a retention and a people perspective, and aligning those. So I think it is a data-driven market, but it's also, because we're dealing with people, there's a huge experience component as well.
Great. You talked about more and more platforms being used. In which applications in the WorkTech space do you think they're going to go first? Because it's the most productive, the easiest to get into, it's low-hanging fruit. Where do you think we're going to see the most activity?
Well, if you look at how broad WorkTech is, you look at payroll, you look at core HR. I mean, every business needs to pay their people. There's sort of a core requirement there. So a lot of these systems came out of the service bureau industries in the 50s, and I'm not exaggerating, and have evolved through acquisition and through some organic development over the years. And I think that's ripe for innovation. And we've seen it with some of these global payroll providers, these sort of employee of record solutions that have been emerging. And, we'll probably see some acquisitions by some of those long in the tooth players as well. Another key area, though, is in when we look at the core, parts of the employee lifecycle. Recruitment is a place where, while it feels as though, I think to a lot of folks that what was known as the applicant tracking system is sort of a back office, tool set of modules that are less relevant. I think now more than ever, given issues with personal identifying information, security, privacy, and now this AI boom, it's more important than ever to have a really solid platform play, especially for the larger enterprises, to build off of. And I think that's where we're going to see extensions into experience. So candidate engagement, communication, hiring manager engagement, the ability to get the message and keep the process moving. That's where you're going to see a lot of extension from the platform, along with, you'll still see things like administrative things like background checks and whatnot that get built off. But I think we're going to see some new platform leaders in the recruitment space. And then the other place would be learning. Learning gets turned on its head every 5 years or so. And right now, I would expect in the next few years to see some ed tech players that have gotten really good at like consumer engagement with learning content, bring that in to the B2B enterprise. It started to happen a little bit with sort of go-to-market and partnerships, but I think you'll see some extensions of learning platforms into the B2B space in the next few years.
Great. I was talking to the head of a staffing agency in my podcast the other day, and they were actually using AI to vet incoming candidates because half the candidates were scraping their portfolio off the website for graphic design or whatever and putting it into their thing. And then an AI system easily points out that that's not yours, that's somebody else's. Where do you see AI having the most impact at this point into the WorkTech space?
I'm seeing it everywhere, right? Just like it's seeping into everything we're doing as consumers or in our businesses, it's seeping in everywhere. There's a lot of the low-hanging fruit, a lot of the sort of gimmicky, write an email for me, things that are helpful from a productivity perspective, but the chat GPT type stuff. But then when you start to think about, let's say the learning content and being able to turn a language model on a library of learning content and almost rewrite it and engage with employees in a more fluid fashion, that's incredible. When you think about where Pivot is in the recruitment space with engaging candidates and the questions that come up about things like shifts and benefits and pay rates and immigration and et cetera, this is something that has classically been a bit of a black hole in the recruitment process, unless you're a candidate that's clearly moving forward. And that's where we've had challenges with candidate experience. And then you think about the internal employees and questions about benefits, questions about dependents, questions. So, there are large enterprises have large call centers and service desk type operations just to respond to employees, where those employees are looking up data that AI can easily, capture, keep it within a firewall, keep it, not go outside. I think we're going to see a lot of shifts in any place where there's, thinking about, content that needs to be delivered to external candidates or internal employees.
And what about the shift to remote work? It seemed like that's here to stay. I saw a lot of people fighting that for a while, but it seems like that's won out for the most part. Maybe there's hybrid models, but how has that impacted the WorkTech stack and the growth of it?
Yeah, we see. I would agree with you that it's here to stay. I think to me the debate over in the office or remote is the wrong conversation to be having. It's, again, as I said earlier, it's about your business. You certainly have to have folks on a shop floor if you're in manufacturing or you're a hospital. If you're looking for data scientists, having a distributed workforce is probably a pretty smart play for you. And what we're seeing is, first off, we were already in the cloud, so we have the ability to deliver a lot of the content, a lot of the experience via browsers, via mobile already. But what we're seeing now is getting beyond the cursory sort of flow of work stuff, like, being able to initiate something out of Slack or Teams or Zoom, and being able to really be engaged, and AI is helping here as well, be engaged in those platforms and really transact in those platforms. So not have to leave Slack in order to, request time off, not have to leave Teams in order to find out what the next step is in my performance process. A lot of that is coming, and a lot of that sort of, cross-channel approach is where we're seeing a lot of activity right now, recruitment as well.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. If there are any other questions, guys, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll have George answer them during the next pitch online. George, if you want to just check, see if there are any chats come up, that would be helpful. And with that, let's switch over to Mike Seidel, and I have PivotCX with Howard Bates. Guys, if you want to go ahead and put your slides up and kick off, we'll have a presentation on an HR tech system here.
All right. Well, Hall, thanks so much. And George, thank you so much. Every time you present, I learn a ton. So really appreciate you coming on today. So we are PivotCX, and we're focused on really simplifying talent acquisition and HR communication. We're one of those new platforms that George was talking about. We solve communication problems in that $54 billion HR tech market that George went through. We're really focused on bringing almost contact center-like capability to recruiting teams in just an off-the-shelf way. We let companies hire faster, better, retain more employees, and we make life a lot easier for the employees that are delivering that service, be it recruiters or HR folks. Quick look at our leadership team. Howard and I have been at this for a while. PivotCX is the fifth company I've started. Howard's started a few too. He's had one public exit. I've had two private exits. So I'll let Howard tell you a little bit about that public exit.
No, I guess what I would say about that, just real quickly, this is, I guess, we always look at the leadership team. And I was very fortunate, honestly, and right timing to have started a company with a $50K second mortgage on my house, which actually grew into a public entity. So, and I think the market cap of that entity right now is still over $3 billion. I think another person here that we should bring up and mention is David Bernstein. David's really leading our partnership activities in this space. He has been in this environment as a practitioner, much like George has been, and worked with a number of different startups and high growth companies in this space. So we're really fortunate to have him on board as well.
One of the things I always like to share with people about Pivot is we've managed to attract a really strong group of advisors around our company, including the head of product for Genesis, which is a big multi-channel communication system vendor. Our guest today on this presentation, George LaRocque, We just added a new advisor, Craig Fisher, who is the expert on candidate experience across the WorkTech marketplace. William Tincup, who's really the foremost thought leader in HR tech software, and others. We've got a really strong group of advisors around us and helping us make sure we're making the right product for our customers. So what's really special about Pivot? Well, we've got to a really great point on product market fit. We're ready to rapidly scale this business up. We're really looking at raising money right now, just really focus all of it on growing our sales efforts. We've managed to land some great clients, Kelly Services, Great Clips, Community Healthcare, 7-Step, HTI. We just landed Hornblower, which is one of the largest cruise ship operators in the world. Our leadership team, we've covered that already. We've been around for a while. And we're creating a new category inside that WorkTech marketplace, a communications hub. We're trying to be the glue between all these systems so we can have one source of truth for communication. And we own all of our IP, and we're uniquely positioned because our focus on communication and connection into other systems to really be a great point to plug in and build these new AI workflows. So the problem that we're focused on is really slow and effective communication. If you've ever tried to apply for a job and never heard back, or maybe you went to your HR team and asked a question about benefits and not heard anything, you've experienced the exact problem that we deal with. Recruiters and HR people, they're not out to ignore you or anything like that. They're just really, really busy. Our research showed that recruiters alone have to log into 21 different systems every day just to do their job. It looks like George had said 30, so maybe we have to revise this slide. But there's an awful lot of different IT systems that these people have to deal with, and logging in and using these systems takes a lot of time. A lot of these systems are older and they don't offer the right channels for people to communicate on. So we're maybe sending text messages to a forklift driver, or we're trying to send a text to a doctor and you're just not getting the right response. That leads to a poor candidate experience. And across our customer base, what we found is because the candidate experience is so bad, about half of their recruitment marketing spend is wasted completely because no one ever hears from the recruiter. We also really see recruiters lose a lot of their day just to poor tools and having to log into all those systems. And on the employment side, lack of employee engagement or poor employee engagement leads to turnover, and that's really, really costly. Just a quick look at the market that we're in. And again, I don't want to repeat what George just said, but things that get us excited about this market, that 20% CAGR is exciting. And the fact that the segment that we're in, when you look at our obtainable market, it's so big that there's room for us and a few competitors.
Not to mention, George's slide was more comprehensive than this, although he provided a lot of the content, research content on this. So this is only the United States. This is not global. So when you look at George's numbers, this is almost dwarfed.
So what is our product? We are a software as a service solution. We are a communication hub for recruiting and HR. You connect PivotCX to your applicant tracking system, your HRIS, maybe your employment CRM, and Pivot enables communication across voice, video, text, and even web and other channels. Our goal is really to give all the recruiters, all your HR folks, the ability to communicate with employees, with candidates in a way that gives you a single source of truth for a conversation through the whole cycle. We improve the candidate experience. We give recruiters back time, and we give them tools that they really don't have right now with these legacy systems to personalize at the scale they need to communicate with everyone.
Yeah, because they're really used to doing one-on-one personalization. And just with some of the new features we brought out in the platform, with dynamic lists, we are allowing people now to search their entire database of candidates, employees, and then personalize those messages and automate those
in just a few seconds. It's really easy to do. And on the employment side, we're being used to really improve employee engagement, and we're seeing some really, really great results there. We do have a couple of generative AI features that are coming out soon. We're leveraging the new generation of translation technology to enable recruiters to speak languages they don't speak and talk to candidates that they don't speak the same language as. We're also rolling out 2 Copilot features really to recommend the right answers and help recruiters and help HR folks be able to answer those kind of questions that George was bringing up earlier. easier and more accurately. And this is just a little bit about what industry experts are saying about PivotCX. The one thread that all of these things have in common is that we're ahead of where a lot of the other existing players in the market are, and we're really building something that's new and different. You know, like all businesses, we do have some competition, and we largely are competing with tools that are single-use kinds of tools. They focus on one channel, or maybe one channel. So if you look across this, we do voice, video, web, and text, and most of our competitors do only one other channel like text. So we have 4 times more channels, communication channels that we enable right out of the box. And then if you look at what we integrate with, we have a really good story here. We integrate with over 128 different ATSs, HRI and HRISs. If I added CRMs, that number is actually bigger. We actually integrate with 5 times more systems of record than our nearest competitor does. We also have a complete open API. We have customers that build solutions on top of our software. And that's really leading to a level of stickiness. You know, we have very, very, very low attrition in our customer base as a result. Our business model is really, really simple. It's subscription SaaS. We sell PivotCX by the team, and we charge a monthly fee. That what you're seeing on the screen here is exactly our base price in both at the low level and at the premium level. The thing that gets me excited is that our average ARR is actually higher than our list price. And that's because we have the right upsells and we have value beyond the product that we can sell to these customers to grow our revenue. Here's a quick look at what's in the box on our gold package. And it's pretty comprehensive and complete. The whole idea with Pivot is you have to log in to, you know, up to 30 systems in a day. We want to be replacing 11 of those if we can right out of the gate. Our go-to-market plan is pretty simple. It's about 55% channel partners and 45% direct sales. And here's a quick look at who some of those partners are. We partner with consulting companies, recruitment ad agencies, recruitment process outsourcers, and other WorkTech solutions. It's a quick look into our pipeline. And at the bottom, you'll see business that we've closed. These are our customers. And then you can see what's coming on the partner side and what's coming on the direct business side. Let's take a quick look at 4 of our bigger customers, our biggest successes. One is Community Health Network. That's the largest employer in Indiana. It's a hospital chain. Every candidate that gets hired at Community goes through PivotCX. Anyhow, over the last year, they've been with us and they just renewed and they increased their license by over 21%. So we've expanded ARR there by 21%. Kelly Services is using us for employee engagement, and we're actually letting people know what time their shift is about an hour before their shift, and we've cut their absentee rate in half. So the result of that, we do expect a pretty big expansion on this project because the ROI on this has just been phenomenal for them. Great clips, 4,500 stores, 700 franchise owners. We deliver talent to all of them, and we were contracted and asked to deliver 2,000 candidates in 1 year by re-engaging their existing talent database. We were able to deliver 5,322 stylists to those franchise owners. So we overperformed quite a bit, and we are now in discussions on terms for our renewal for next year. 7-Step, the 10th largest recruiting process outsourcer in the world. By the way, Kelly is number 2. They hired us for a pilot where we were able to actually reduce ghosting on new hires by 30%. They also found that they were over recruiting because they got 30% of people to show up to work. And as a result, they had a less than 1 month payback for the solution that they bought from PivotCX. The result of that is 7-Step is now taking PivotCX to all of their recruiting customers and offering it as one of their solutions. So here's what the numbers say about Pivot.
Yeah, real quickly here, just to give you a sense of some of the market dynamics that, you know, George was alluding to, and some of the actual performance that we're seeing. You know, if I look at it, we've grown the business, our platform growth, Q1 over Q1 last year, 117%. To me, the CAC payback ratio is a wonderful metric to look at because it basically tells you how effective we are on return on investment for what we're doing, trying to generate new customers. So most of the folks that we've talked to, when they see that, they're quite impressed by it. Another thing is our gross margins, even at the at the baseline level, and Mike and I know we're not at a scale level where we're driving more revenue over fixed cost. But I was really excited to see that last month our margins improved to actually the mid 70s over the 66%. So it's a good, very good, solid SaaS metrics here. I think they're going to continue. One thing I'm going to mention, I think we'll lead into it here in a moment, but right now, we've got about 10 people in the company. We have one person that you would call a dedicated salesperson, and that's David Bernstein, who's out there working our partnerships. So as Mike has mentioned, all of the funding that we're asking for right now is to drive opportunity that George sees in the market that we know we can get to, and that's what our whole focus is on right now. So just the specifics of what we're doing right now, we're looking at raising 1.5 million. That's a priced round, basically pre-money valuation of 6 million. We actually had a very sophisticated investor yesterday talked at the median seed series and valuation was 10 million. So I'm going to say this, I think we're a really good deal. We have a lead investor already in place that's committed 500K, and working with Hall and some of the contacts and folks that he's helped us engage with, we're hoping to get that balance of $1 million closed here within the next 30 days. I think I don't even know if I should even go over this slide because George basically gave you more current information than what we have on this. It's just really sharing with you that the activity level, investment, acknowledgement of this space is a really critical component to business is accelerating, and it's picking back up with a lot of momentum. So a lot of potential exit opportunities for us over the next 3 to 5 years. And so I think if we can get on the field here and get growing, all of our investors are going to be very happy that they made a choice to invest with us.
And with that, Hall, I'll turn it over to you, or I'll turn it over to you for questions.
Great. If anybody in the audience has questions, please put them in the chat box. My first question to you guys is, how does your solution fit into the WorkTech space? What part does it cover?
We're focused squarely, on when we go into accounts, we start on talent acquisition, but increasingly we're also going in on the employee engagement side of this and connecting into those payroll systems and that sort of thing that George was talking about, and dealing with some very just real meaningful problems for those employers. Getting their workers to show up to work on time, getting people to show up on time for their first day of work. Those are really expensive problems that have a really high ROI to solve. And what's exciting to me about that is a lot of times the solution is just communication with that candidate, with that employee, telling them, hey, your shift starts at 9 a.m. today, your lunch is at 11:30, your afternoon shift starts at 11:45, and you're done at 3, whatever that is.
I think, one of the things that I was going to say is what George mentioned is kind of what we're experiencing and are seeing is that what Mike said is we kind of started with helping the recruiting talent acquisition areas. But what's really happening is the breadth of the solution can overlay the full life cycle of talent acquisition through HR employee management. So we've got a really interesting platform that can bleed into, which actually would make our potential market opportunity. And I look at this way because there's a ton of use cases that are out there, and we're actually creating a library of use cases that we're going to be giving to our customers where they can look at it and go, here's 5 things you could begin to do immediately with this to get really high payback. So I love it because it gets really sticky, and it's going to be a solution that gets embedded in there and stays for a long, long time.
Great. And so you have a lead investor. Can you talk more about how that deal works?
Sure. So basically, Elevate Ventures is a venture firm here in Indiana. They're primarily focused on seed series type investment, early stage. And what they've done is they've committed 500,000 to us. And what it appears, we'll know the full answer, Hall, on this either tomorrow or Monday, but it looks like what we're going to be able to do is If we raise 100, they'll put 100 in versus having to wait for the full 500 and then they match the 500. So I have a verbal approval on that right now. Their investment committee will meet tomorrow, Monday, and I'm just going to say I'm very optimistic that the answer is going to be yes. And that really helps us out immensely because it immediately puts to work the investment that an angel group or a VC group would put in to match with us. So that's how that works. There's actually a term sheet. I'll mention one other thing while you're on that point. And that is, so for the VCs, it's really important for them to see us being a C corporation. So right now we're a Delaware LLC. By the end of next week, I'm anticipating that we will have made the conversion to a C corporation, which just makes it a lot easier for some of the big angels and angel groups as well as VCs. So that'll be done. I really we're anticipating by the end of next week that'll be completed.
Hey, question from the audience is, at the enterprise clients, who is the key buyer of your product?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think
we'll hammer
it's it's actually a really good question. Key buyer we really have two of them. On the talent side, it's generally going to be the whoever the head of recruiting is. That could be the chief HR officer or the CHRO in some companies. It also could be head of talent acquisition or the chief talent officer. Just depends on how that company is structured. On the HR side, generally we're being brought in by somebody who's leading a business unit in the HR office that has a intense problem with dealing with like employees being late or employees not showing up and wanting to get a solution there.
I think
you may want to add to that.
So. Yeah, no, what I was going to say is it's a really good question. And what we're doing is we're teeing up the success stories that we have right now, who those buyers were, what the driver was on that act, why did they make that decision, and putting together a whole marketing campaign. So when we do get our funding in here and we're able to bring on some sales folks and a marketing resource that we can actually go and efficiently get to those buyers with the right message. I'll tell you one other good thing about this is, and I don't know if George is still on the call or not, but many of these enterprise systems are intergalactic, multi-million-dollar, sometimes tens of millions of dollars of deployment like Workday and others. Okay, we can come in. You guys saw what our AOVs are. So coming in at 2K, 3K, 5K a month, most of the HR teams of any substance can fit that into their budget. They can move things around going, this isn't performing very well. We're going to bring these guys in and we solve, immediately we can solve some point solutions for them. That I think everyone that you saw in this presentation today had a payback in less than 2 to 3 months. So that's a great message for them to be able to take to their management team and say, we're not adding cost, we're actually reducing and improving and getting a payback on it very quickly.
Great. My last question is, how are you leveraging AI into your application and your platform?
That's Mike.
So on the AI side, Paul, we've been looking at really how do we how do we use AI to improve communication. And there's a couple areas that we're actually building our AI stack. One is translation. It's still a big problem. A lot of times you're hiring people that don't speak the same language as you do. It's still a big problem for recruiters. Not all of them come out of college or come out of life knowing multiple languages. So some of the newer AI translation tools are pretty big for a communication stack like ours. The second thing that's really we're doing is working on getting the right answers in front of the recruiters or in front of the HR people to common questions. And then as we get that built out and start getting the feedback loop going between the recruiters going, this is the right answer, this is the right answer, we'll be able to start automating that and making it so we're able to accurately answer questions about anything to do with work, be it pre-employment or post-employment.
Yeah, one of the, Paul, really good question here. So you kind of look at the data, because I think we all heard that, having the data sets to actually use AI tools against. So immediately when we integrate with an applicant tracking system, this is bidirectional data flows. So we pull in, as an example, with community health care, we pulled in 1.6 million applications and employee records into our platform. We have all of that data in there. And so now think about it. It's a very important, relevant data set to use AI tools against. And we can do that. Literally, it took, I'll let Mike talk, but it was a very, very short period of time. And we had 1.6 million of their former employees and applicants into our platform. So
yeah, it's you know, our strategy with data is to make it so we've got the data in the right place so we can actually build these AI-based workflows. And I think that's a real problem. And I think Hall or not Hall, but George mentioned this, that there's a lot of kind of easy, low-hanging fruit use cases, and you know, writing job descriptions and that sort of thing. And those are the really easy things to do. The things that are really high value that you would really want to get an AI into require a lot of data. And one of the bigger problems the enterprise has right now is that data is in a lot of different places and not in one place that you can easily load that in. You know, our integration layer right now connects into actually all 4 of the major cloud AI services. So we have the ability to plug into Bard, we have the ability to plug into ChatGPT on Azure, the ability to plug into AWS's solution, and OpenAI as well. So we've got multiple ways to do that, and our integration side is pretty strong. But the key to that is getting the data into a place that you actually can move it around and get it into the, you know, the LLM is only as good as it is able to learn, and we have we have the data.
Great. Well, we're at the end of our time here, guys. I want to thank everybody for great presentations and a great pitch. Thank you, George, for your great presentation there. Mike, Howard, thanks for the great pitch. Good questions from the audience. I want to thank everybody for putting this together. We've recorded this. We'll share this back with you guys later so you can use it as you like. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up for today, and see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks.